Let's take a look at the steps involved to solve the equation by completing the square method. As I go through the steps, I'm going to take a look at this example right below and see how we're going to apply these steps. Here we want to solve the equation x squared plus 6x plus 5 equal to 0 by completing the square method. You notice that the first step says that the coefficient of x squared must be equal to 1 in order to be able to use this method. So in this case, we don't have to worry about that. It's already coefficient of x squared is equal to 1. Since the leading coefficient is 1, step number 1 is not necessary. Now step number 2 says rewrite the equation with the constant by itself on the right side of the equation. I don't really need this constant here. I'm going to have a proper constant, a constant that would make this left-hand side perfectly squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this constant to the other side of the equation by subtracting 5 from both sides of the equation. So first step, the second step is to just have these two terms by itself, x squared and 6x. Now I need to know what makes these two perfectly square. We already talked about that in another session. You would take the coefficient of x, you divide it by 2, or you multiply by 1/2, and you square them. So you take 6 divided by 2, 3 squared give you 9. So that's the number would make the left-hand side completely squared. So I need to add that to both sides of the equation. If I add 9 to both sides of the equation, the left-hand side, what do I get? X squared plus 6x plus 9. The right-hand side, I would get 4. Look what happens to the left-hand side. Not only this is going to be factorable now, when I factor this, you see I get x here and x here for 9. Remember the trial and error method? 9 would be 1 times 9, 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 results into 6. So not only this is factorable, but also would be the same binomial. So here I've done it. I made this perfectly squared. So once you've done that, step number 5, we're going to use square root property to solve for this. I would say x plus 3 squared is equal to plus and minus square root of 4. So I get x plus 3 is equal to plus 2. Or at this point, I can subtract 3 from both sides of the equation. So I would get x equal to minus 3 plus and minus 2. So x would be equal to negative 3 plus 2. X also would be equal to negative 3 minus 2. I get two solutions, negative 1 and negative 5. Of course, we want to check our answers at the end. Okay, we're going to practice now. Take a look at these two examples. What I'd like you to do is to solve by completing square method. For those of you watching this later, I would suggest to pause the session now and then compare your answers with our solution. Okay, let's take a look at the solutions together. All right, who wants to go over the steps for the first one? We have x squared minus 12x plus 32 equal to 0. So what's the first step, anyone? Subtract 32 from both sides of the equation because we don't need this constant. If I move that 32 to the other side, then what do I do? What do I add to both sides of the equation? 36. How do I get 36? You take the coefficient of x, which is negative 12, divided by 2, and you square them. You get 36. That's how you add 36 to both sides of the equation. Any questions so far? Step number 1 is to move 32 to the other side of the equation by adding negative 32 or subtract 32 from both sides of the equation. And then you add 36 to both sides of the equation. Then we get x squared minus 12x plus 36 equal to 4. You notice that the left-hand side is factorable now. That would be x minus 6 times x minus 6, or x minus 6 squared is equal to 4. Negative 32 plus 36 equal to 4. Now we can use the square root property to solve for this. You would say x minus 6 equal to plus and minus that equal 4. So x is equal to, if I add 6 to both sides of the equation, would be 6 plus and minus radical 4, which is 2. Here are my two answers. X equal to 6 plus 2, or x equal to 6 minus 2 is equal to 4. So answers are 4 and 8. Any question on that? What's the first step for part B? You add 9, so you move this 9 to the right. So I would get x squared plus 3x is equal to 9. I need to add something to the left-hand side to complete the square. What is that number I need? You take the coefficient of x, which is 3. What do you do with that? Multiply by 1/2 or divide by 2, you get 3/2. And what do you do with that? You square it. So it looks like the number you need to add to both sides of the equation is what? 9/4. I need to add 9/4 to both sides of the equation. Are there any questions up to this point? Now we could have a fraction, as you see sometimes, not always a whole number. On the left-hand side, I get x squared minus 3x plus 9/4. On the right-hand side, what do I get? 9 plus 9/4. What is 9 plus 9/4? 9 over 1 plus 9 over 4. We have to add these two, right? What's LCD? 4. So I have to multiply the first fraction with 4 over 4, right? So what do I get? 36 plus 9 over 4, right? Which is equal to what? 45 over 4. So on the right-hand side, I would get 45 over 4. You see what we're doing so far? We're just simply adding these two numbers together. Place them here. Now, is the left-hand side factorable? Better be, because we find the number to make this perfectly squared. That would factor into what? So in the left-hand side, I have x squared plus 3x plus 9/4. This would be x. What number goes here? Would be square root of this, right? Which is 3/2 and 3/2. You can check, make sure that works. This would be 3/2 x. This would be 3/2 x. What is 3/2 plus 3/2? 6 over 2, which is equal to 3. That's exactly what we want, right? You want this to add up to 3x. It does. 3/2 plus 3/2 is equal to 3. So you see that it works. So now we have x plus 3/2 squared is equal to 45 over 4. So now we can use the square root property. You say x minus 3/2 is equal to plus and minus square root of 45 over 4, which is x equal to minus 3/2 plus and minus square root of 45 over 4. But we need to simplify square root of 45 over 4. That's the same as square root of 45 over square root of 4, right? What is square root of 45 is equal to? 9 times 5? 9 times 5. So part of that is perfectly squared. So that would be 3 radical 5 over 2. That's what we have. 3 radical 5 over 2. So x would be equal to negative 3 plus 3 radical 5 over 2, or negative 3 minus 3 radical 5 over 2.